Welcome, dear listener. Whether you're winding down for the night or simply seeking a moment of quiet reflection, I'm glad you've joined me. Before we begin tonight's journey into the dimly lit chambers of medieval life and the strange reasons why people once slept naked with knives tucked under their pillows, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time of day it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far our community of curious minds and night owl stretches. If you enjoy calm, immersive storytelling that brings the odd corners of history to life, consider subscribing so you never miss a tale. Now, make yourself comfortable. Take a deep breath. Let your mind drift back through the centuries to a world where darkness brought danger and people clung to rituals that seem strange to us today. Imagine a flickering candle, cold stone walls, a small bed stuffed with straw, a body curled under, rough linen sheets, and beneath the pillow, a glint of iron. This is where we begin. Welcome to the darkness. You wake in the darkness of a 14th century night. And the first thing you notice is the cold, not the romanticized chill of medieval tales, but the bone-deep cold that historical records from 1347 describe in meticulous detail. The wooden shutters rattle against their iron hinges shutters. That cost nearly 3 months' wages for a skilled craftsman to install. According to the surviving accounts from English manor houses of this period, beneath you, the straw mattress shifts with every movement. This isn't the soft straw of harvest time, but the coarse, broken stems that families would gather in late autumn and use throughout the winter months. Historical inventories from peasant households show that a typical mattress contained between 40 and 60 pounds of straw. Replaced only twice yearly if the family was fortunate, the scratching sensation against your bare skin would have been constant, documented in medical treatises of the time as a leading cause of skin ailments among the lower classes. Your nakedness is not accidental medieval sleeping customs. Preserved in household management guides from the 13th and 14th centuries, reveal that sleeping without clothing was standard practice across all social classes. The reasons were entirely practical. Clothes were expensive, requiring months of labor to produce, and sleeping in them would wear out the fabric prematurely. A single woolen tunic represented roughly 40 days of a laborer's wages. More importantly, nakedness made it easier to detect parasites, lice, fleas, and bedbugs that thrived in the warmth of medieval bedding. The blade resting inches from your chest tells a story that court records and guild documents have preserved for us. In 1347, the year the Black Death reached European shores, weapon ownership among common people increased by an estimated 300%. Not because of war, but because of something far more mundane and terrifying, the complete breakdown of local law enforcement. Town watch records from this period show that night patrols were reduced to skeleton crews, as many guards either fled or died from plague. But what exactly were you afraid of in those dark hours? The answer lies in the boring bureaucratic records that few historians bothered to examine. Tax collection documents from 1347 show that rural areas experienced a 40% increase in property theft. Church records indicate that reports of nighttime break-ins doubled. Most telling of all, coroner's inquests from English counties reveal that deaths from violence in private homes increased by 60% during the plague years, not from disease, but from desperate people doing desperate things. The fear wasn't supernatural. It was utterly, mundanely human. Hungry neighbors, displaced families, merchants fleeing infected towns with nothing but what they could carry. The night brought real dangers that required real solutions. Staying alert, staying armed, staying alive. What drove ordinary people to transform their bedchambers into fortresses? And how did this single year reshape the way Europeans thought about safety in their own homes? Houses made of death traps. You live in what medieval housing surveys euphemistically called a single bay dwelling, a one-room cottage measuring roughly 12 feet by 16 feet. The standard dimensions recorded in thousands of manorial court rolls across England, these structures built by necessity rather than choice housed an average of 42 people according to poll tax records from 1377. Privacy was not a concept that existed in your vocabulary because privacy was not a concept that existed in your reality. The fire that flickers in your central hearth follows. A pattern documented in medieval household management guides. You bank it each evening with a technique passed down through generations, covering the coals with ash to preserve heat overnight, while reducing the risk of house fires. Archaeological evidence from excavated medieval cottages reveals that these hearths were rebuilt an average of every 3 years. Their stones cracked and blackened from constant use. The smoke that fills your single room follows the path of least resistance up through a simple hole in the thatched roof. Though building regulations from 14th century English towns show that most of it simply lingered at eye level, creating the chronic respiratory problems that medical treatises of the period described in clinical detail. Your door, a simple wooden barrier held by leather hinges, represents one of the most significant security failures in medieval domestic architecture. Surviving examples from archaeological sites show that most cottage doors could be opened with a firm push, as metal locks remained prohibitively expensive. A basic iron lock cost approximately 2 months' wages for a skilled craftsman. According to guild price lists from London and Paris, the result was that nearly 80% of rural dwellings remained unlocked at night. A statistic preserved in coroner's inquest that dutifully recorded how intruders gained entry to homes. The threats that kept you armed were meticulously documented by medieval authorities. Roaming mercenaries, unemployed soldiers from the endless conflicts between European powers moved through rural areas in groups of 5 to 20 men. Military payroll records show that during peacetime, approximately 30,000 professional soldiers across Europe found themselves without employment, surviving through what contemporary sources politely termed living off the land. Church records from the period contain hundreds of accounts of armed men demanding food, shelter, and payment from isolated households. But the most common threat came from the most ordinary source, your neighbors. Manor court rolls reveal that domestic break-ins were committed by people living within a 5-mile radius in 73%. Of cases, these weren't professional criminals, but desperate families, struggling craftsmen, or simply opportunistic individuals who knew exactly what their neighbors owned and when they might be most vulnerable. The social fabric that had held rural communities together for centuries was fraying under the pressure of economic collapse. Plague and political instability, even the rats posed a documented threat. Medieval medical texts described cases of sleeping individuals being bitten by rats large enough to cause serious wounds. Archaeological evidence from medieval refuse pits shows that urban rat populations reached extraordinary densities, with some historians estimating that rats outnumbered humans by a ratio of nearly 4 to 1 in most towns. How did people maintain any sense of security when their homes offered no protection and their neighbors posed as much danger as strangers? Naked in the name of God. Your priest's teachings about nakedness and purity weren't heretical innovations, but established church doctrine that can be traced through hundreds of surviving theological treatises. From the 13th and 14th centuries, the concept of nuditas virtuous. Nakedness appears in the writings of prominent theologians like Thomas Aquinas and Duns Scotus, who argued that the human body in its natural state was God's perfect creation, unmarred by the artificial coverings that symbolized humanity's fall from grace. Parish records from across Europe show that these teachings were disseminated to local congregations through mandatory Sunday sermons, creating a widespread belief that sleeping clothed was spiritually corrupting. The practice of confessing dreams was codified in church law during the Fourth Lateran Council of 1215, which required annual confession of all sins, including those committed in sleep. Medieval confession manuals, such as the widely distributed Summa Confessorum, provided priests with detailed questions about nocturnal experiences. Penitential records from monasteries show that monks were required to report dreams involving violence, lust, or apostasy, with specific penances assigned based on the dream's content. For lay people, This created an intimate relationship between spiritual authority and the most private moments of sleep. The theological justification for bodily purification through nakedness was extensively documented in medieval religious texts. The Speculum Morale and other moral treatises argued that clothing, especially at night, prevented the body from releasing the spiritual impurities that accumulated during waking hours. Medical texts influenced by religious doctrine, such as those written by Hildegard of Bingen, described how fabrics could trap corrupt vapors that would otherwise escape through the skin during sleep. This belief was so widespread that even wealthy merchants and nobility often slept unclothed, as evidenced by inventory records of noble households that list elaborate daytime wardrobes but minimal sleeping attire. The vulnerability that accompanied this religious nakedness was acknowledged in church writings themselves. Episcopal letters from the period frequently addressed the spiritual tension between purity and protection, advising parishioners to maintain their devotional practices while remaining vigilant against worldly dangers. The Church's solution was practical. Weapons were not considered sinful if used for protection rather than aggression, a distinction carefully outlined in canon law texts that survive in cathedral archives. When violence struck the religiously vulnerable, it sent shockwaves through established doctrine. Historical records from 1347 document the murder of Isabella de Montfort, niece to the Bishop of Winchester, found dead in her chambers, following precisely the sleeping practices her uncle had preached. The coroner's inquest, preserved in the Winchester Cathedral archives, noted that she was discovered in the manner of holy sleep, yet violated by mortal sin. This case, and others like it, forced church authorities to reconcile their teachings about spiritual purity with the harsh realities of physical safety. The aftermath of such incidents created a theological crisis that church records show was never fully resolved. How could the pursuit of spiritual purity coexist with the necessity of physical protection? And what did it mean when faith itself became a form of vulnerability? The door that won't stay closed, the door never quite shuts. The latch sticks, the hinges groan. You've wedged it with stone and scrap and the end of a broken chair leg. Still, the wind worries it loose. Still, something could push it open. Someone you don't trust doors anymore, you haven't in years, not since the night raids began. Not since your neighbor's husband was found dead in his bed. Slit from chest to chin, his wife dazed and bleeding from the nose. They never caught who did it. Maybe no one ever came. Maybe she did it herself. The official accounts from 1362 mention disturbances. In Yorkshire alone, 5 deaths in 1 month. Villagers waking to figures in their homes, weapons in hand, screams. Blood, panic in the dark. Sometimes it was thieves, sometimes it was neighbors. Sometimes it was no one at all. A dream that turned too real. A mistake you couldn't take back. You sleep lightly now. Every creak is a question. Every gust of wind is a footstep. You know the house well enough to notice what isn't yours. You count breaths in the dark. Sometimes you lose count. That's when you grip the knife. Your child sleeps in the same room, close by. That's not softness, it's strategy. You need to be between them and the door. They're 6 now. They don't read yet, but they know how to listen. They know how to hold the dagger's hilt. Blade pointed down, knees bent for speed. You taught them that before their letters. Because paper doesn't keep you alive. And yet, the worst part is when it's someone you know. The man your cousin married, he came back from a raid confused. He thought he saw someone in the house. He called out. No answer. He struck. His own son, 2 years old. They buried them both in silence. No questions, no blame. That's how common it became. Even the priests began locking their doors. Some say it was hunger that did it. Famine followed plague. Families grew desperate. Men left their villages and came back strangers. They saw ghosts or became them. Others say it was fear. Fear feeding itself. One attack led to another. One dead child justified another drawn blade. Doors were no longer barriers. They were invitations. Tonight, yours moves again. You hear the wood strain. You watch the frame bend. Your child doesn't stir. You don't speak. You just breathe and wait and wonder. Is it the wind this time? Or will it be your own hand that makes the mistake? When the rats come screaming, the Black Death did not come quietly. You heard it long before you saw it, not the illness itself, but the noise it made in people, the howling, the choking, the screaming that rose in the middle of the night when someone realized the swelling on their neck was not from sleep, but something darker. It moved like a shadow through the streets, but it had a sound, a child calling for help, a mother sobbing into cloth, a priest chanting too quickly to mean what he said. You hear the screams before you ever see the rats. By then, it's too late. At first, you burn incense, then ash, then whatever you can find. Lavender, dung, feathers, prayer notes, some people. Burn their neighbors' belongings, hoping the smoke will drive out the plague or please the saints. One woman burns her husband's boots in the town square. She says he was coughing. She says he touched the woodpile. No one argues. The rats come in the dark. Sometimes one at a time, sometimes in clusters. They run along rafters, they skitter in and out of your firewood. You hear them chewing the edges of your grain sacks. You try to kill them, but there are too many. And even if you do, their fleas remain. You sleep naked now, not out of comfort, but because cloth carries fleas. And the fleas carry the sickness. You wash your bedding with vinegar, beat your blankets with sticks. Still, there are bites. Always more bites. Some people have taken to sleeping on stone floors, wrapped in oiled paper. Others hang themselves before the swelling starts. It is said in some villages the healthy flee into the woods, hoping the trees can save them. But trees do not argue with plague. They only bury it in leaves. The fever comes quickly when it strikes. It strikes hard. A man can feel fine at sunrise and die before dark. And when it comes for you, and you'll know it, there's a moment when your thoughts go somewhere strange. You forget names, you see things that aren't real. You begin to think maybe you've been dead for days already. That is what. The knife is for, not for others, not for rats, for you. You keep it clean, you keep it sharp, you keep it close. Because if the plague reaches your brain, and they say it does, you want one moment of choice left. Not to scream, not to be carried out headfirst and dropped in a pit. Just one last moment of quiet. And as you lie there tonight, eyes open, listening to the scratching in the beams and the coughing down the road, you wonder if the fever comes. Tomorrow, will you use the knife or wait to forget why you sharpened it? Here are image prompts for each paragraph of Section 5. Dreams of burning men. You dream of fire often. Not roaring, not bright, but creeping, a crawling flame that starts small. A dropped candle, a spark from a hearth, a forgotten taper near cloth, and then always the scream, always the sound. Before the light, the fire never begins in your dream. It's always already burning. You walk into it like a memory you've lived before in the year 1351. Near the town of Ghent, a blaze destroyed half a village. That's what the records say. A tunic caught flame from a bedside candle. The man wearing it died in the square, trying to outrun the fire climbing up his back. Others who came to help were caught too, not in the flames, but in the smoke. Some choked. Some stumbled into the burning thatch trying to drag others out. You weren't there, of course, but the story spreads like fire. That's how it works. After that, some people slept without clothes, not for comfort, not for purity, but because wool burned quickly, and linen even faster. Nakedness became survival. You learned to keep your clothes folded near the door. Not worn to bed every night was a risk. Every ember a potential ending. You live in a home of wood and straw. The beams are dry. The rushes on the floor are old. The thatch above you catches in a heartbeat. You have doused your hearth before bed every night for years still. You wake sometimes to the smell of smoke that isn't real. Sometimes it is real. You've seen fire move faster than men. You've seen it leap across rooftops and gutters. You've seen it pull screams out of people who didn't know they could make that kind of sound. The knife isn't for defense here, it's for cloth. You keep it beside your sleeping mat, sharp and always reachable. If the fire comes and you believe it will, you know what to do. Cut, tear, strip away what's burning before it becomes part of you. You've done it once before. You remember her skin blistering under the sleeve. You remember the fabric stuck to her arm. You remember the way she bit down on a stick while you sliced the cloth away? She lived, but barely. The dreams come more often now. They always end the same way, not in fire, but in silence. After the flames, after the shouts, there is always the stench. Burning wool, burning hair, burning skin. It stays. Even when you wake, you breathe it in as you lie in the dark, unmoving. And tonight, you wonder if you smell fire again, will it be the dream, or is it already too late? Bedfellows and betrayal, you don't sleep alone. Few do. The poor rarely have the space, the rich rarely have the nerve. Beds are for sharing with family. With workers, with strangers, if the inn is full and the road long, it is not a matter of comfort. It is warmth, survival. Your breath warms their that warms yours. And if you wake in the cold of night, it is often to a knee in your back or an elbow to your ribs, a small price for not freezing to death. But trust is thinner than the blanket you share. You've learned to sleep light, not just for fire or fever or rats, but for the body beside you. Even people you know can become dangerous in the dark, especially when they believe you've wronged them, especially when there is money, land, or pride between you. In 1379, a merchant in York slit his apprentice's throat while he slept. The boy owed him coin, or perhaps insulted him. The record isn't clear. The town bailiff wrote only that the master confessed, and the betting was ruined. That's all history kept. A death, a confession, a soiled mattress. The betting is always ruined. That part stays true. You lie beside someone now. You've known them for years. You share bread, you share tools, you share jokes in daylight. But the night stretches long and your thoughts grow heavy. What if they dream darkly tonight? What if they stir with old anger? What if they wake before you do? You grip the knife more tightly beneath your blanket. You've done nothing wrong, but that hardly matters. A mistake, a misunderstanding, a word overheard and twisted out of shape. You've seen it before. The courts are slow. The justice comes after, but the cut, the betrayal, that comes quick. You've heard stories of couples who smiled all day and turned deadly at night. A man poisoned his wife with moldy bread. A sister smothered her younger brother for inheritance he never even claimed. It doesn't always make the records, but people talk. The villagers remember. Names linger longer than bones. You don't think the one beside you is dangerous. Not really, but the cold is creeping in again. The fire's gone out. You shift slightly. Feeling the blanket move with you, the shared breath is steady. For now, you keep your hand near the blade, just in case. You close your eyes. You try not to wonder what they're thinking. But you do, and you ask yourself, not for the first time, when the warmth beside you turns, will you wake up in time? Wolves at the window. A child vanishes, just bones by dawn. The snow showed no struggle. Just small footprints, leaving the cottage and a dark red trail returning, lighter each step, fading into nothing. By sunrise, only ribs and teeth remained. No one heard a thing, but you know better. You've heard them. You hear them now. The winter wolves have come down from the trees. They're lean, low, and hungry. Their breath fogs the glass of the church when they pass it. Their paws leave no sound in the powder. Just tracks, wide, clawed, deliberate. You sleep near the door now. Not to protect the others. Not really, but to know, to feel it first if they push through. The wood swells in the cold. The latch warps. You've reinforced it twice with rope. And stone, still, it shakes when the wind moves wrong or when something heavier presses. You sleep naked not out of fear, but for speed. Nothing slows you down, not linen, not warmth. The blade lies across your lap. You oiled it against rust. You've used it before, in remote Saxony. The old records say it started in 1387. A rash of disappearances, first livestock, then children, then adults, but only the slow ones. A priest noted in his winter ledger, the wolves grow wise. They test our doors with their teeth. Some laughed. Others stayed awake until spring. You believe the priest. You've seen them circle. You've seen them sit and wait. Black silhouettes. At the edge of torchlight, eyes reflecting back the flame. Not lunging, not howling, just watching, learning. They do not fear humans anymore. They've eaten enough to know your scent, your blood, your limits. You think they know how to wait for tired bones and weak hinges they've grown bold with? Famine. Clever with desperation. Tonight, they scratch, not hard, not constant. Just enough to remind you they're there, just enough to keep your grip tight on the blade. Your body tense beneath the blanket you barely need. You listen for breathing. The others are asleep, somehow. Maybe they pretend. Maybe they've given up listening. You count the scratches, you map them to the window, then the lower door frame. You hear one move across the roof and dislodge snow. Your heart doesn't race, it just waits, calm and slow. Because tomorrow you may be bones too. You think about what they'll leave. A hip, a finger, some teeth, and you wonder, if the door opens tonight, how fast will you move? The madman with the bell. You hear him before you see him. A metallic clanging cuts through the night, uneven and frenzied. A bell, tied to something, someone, and then the voice, screaming. Not words, just sound. Human, but unrecognizable. Like an animal too long in a cage, you're already awake. You've been awake for hours. Sleep comes harder these days. Too many things scuttling in the dark. Too many fears that feel reasonable. In your time, a bell isn't just a sound. It's a warning. It means something dangerous is loose. You press your back against the wall, hand resting on the worn handle of your knife. The blade is dull, but sharp enough for the only purposes it now serves. You sleep naked, not out. Of comfort, but for speed, clothes take time. Time is everything when someone tries to break down your door. The bell is getting louder. He's closer now. They say Bedlam patients sometimes escape. It's not common, but it happened. The records say so in 1383. A man called Thomas in the Rolls escaped from the hospital of St. Mary of Bethlehem. Violent, deranged, stripped bare, and still howling. The authorities recovered him days later, hiding in a churchyard and ringing a bell he'd stolen from a dead man's neck. That story isn't unique. In medieval England, madness walked the streets, sometimes literally. The mad poor. They weren't hidden away, they begged, they wandered. Sometimes they were tied to posts outside of churches with cups nailed. Beside them, inviting charity or at least containment, sometimes they were sent out wearing bells, small ones to warn others they were near. Not always out of cruelty, though that existed. More often, it was out of fear. Fear of the unseen. The unpredictable. Madness wasn't just an illness in your time. It was considered divine punishment, possession, or a form of dangerous enlightenment, something to be watched. Or extinguished. The bell fades now, into the distance you exhale, but slowly you don't. Know if he's gone or just quiet, your knife still rests on your chest. Not just for protection, not anymore. You've thought about what might happen if the madness ever came for you. Not all illness is visible, not all screams come from outside the house, and you wonder, if the time came, would you know? Would you hear your own bell before others did? Skin is cheaper than cloth. Skin is cheaper than cloth. That's the truth you live with. Fabric is taxed, hoarded, rationed. In some villages, linen is counted by the inch. Wool is patched until it disintegrates. Dyes are forbidden unless you're titled or thieving. A single tunic, plain, undyed, poorly stitched, can cost more than a month's labor. So you undress at night, not by choice, but by necessity. You lay your clothing out neatly. You fold. As though it matters, as though reverence might preserve it, you wash it only when absolutely needed. Water is not the issue. Soap is. And fabric wears with scrubbing. You've seen people sleep in straw, on stone, even in ashes, naked, simply to keep the threads from thinning faster. Nakedness isn't shameful here. It's economic, and yet, without fabric, you feel exposed, not to people, to other things. There are stories older than priests, older than parchment, that say demons roam where skin is bare, that flesh uncovered is flesh unguarded, that if you die without cloth, your soul wanders longer, colder. You were raised on those stories. You still believe some of them. Even now, when you lie down on a mat, you whisper the old protections. Not loudly, just enough that the syllables form and fall away. You ask the saints for cloth, not for wealth. not for status, just for covering, just for peace. But the prayers don't warm you. The night air bites harder without fabric. The rushes beneath you itch, poke, irritate. You scratch without thinking, you bleed sometimes, you lie perfectly. Still, trying not to tear more skin, trying not to move unless necessary. You know, your ribs show. Hunger does that. But it also makes hiding the knife easier. You tuck it there between two bones. Not under the mat. Too far. Not beside your head. Too obvious, but resting where your breath meets fear. Where, if needed, you can reach it in an instant. You sleep in shifts. Even if you're alone, the darkness feels longer when you're vulnerable. The wind more invasive, the creaks more intentional. You've never seen a demon, but you've seen a man drunk enough to become one. You've seen what hunger and cold and silence can do to someone with a weak will and a stronger blade. So you keep the knife warm against your skin. You keep your prayers short. You keep your eyes open longer than you should. You think about your tunic, folded, precious, irreplaceable, and you wonder how long before it gives out. And when it does, will your skin be enough? Ghosts of the gallows. You pass them every day. Their feet dangle at eye level. Their toes are bare, their ankles bloated. Some swing, some spin slowly. Most don't move at all anymore. The wind makes the ropes creak above your head. You never look directly, but you always notice them. Everyone does. In 1390, the gallows are everywhere. At crossroads, outside churches, at the edge of the fields, near the market gate, where the dogs gather. They aren't hidden. They aren't sacred. They're reminders left out in the sun and rain, on display for however long it takes to make the lesson sink in. Sometimes that's days. Sometimes weeks. Some say the king demanded it. Others say it was the towns themselves trying to hold order with fear. Either way, no one dares to cut them down early. Not unless the crows have finished. And the bones are dry, and the law forgets to care. You walk faster when you pass beneath, not out of fear. Exactly, you're used to them. But sometimes they creak even when there's no wind. Sometimes you hear something fall. A tooth. A finger. A scrap of rope. And sometimes, when the sun is low, you swear their eyes are still open. At night, they follow you home. Not the men you hope, just the image, but it's hard to say. You've dreamed of them more than once. The sound of rope tightening, the sudden snap, the way a body doesn't fall, it just hangs. Frozen, forgotten by time. In the dream, they walk, not like men. Like things pulled by invisible hands. They don't speak, they grin. And they bring the rope with them. You wake with your heart hammering, breath sharp, mouth dry. You sleep naked now. Not for fleas, not for fire, not even for speed, but because something in you believes cloth can catch. That rope can tangle, that you need nothing a noose can grip. The blade stays under your hands. You don't even keep it beside you anymore. You sleep with it across your belly, the hilt resting on your skin, the edge sharp enough to remind you you're awake. You whisper old prayers when the wind rattles. The shutters, you keep your eyes on the door. Waiting for the shape you saw in your dream to return. You don't believe in ghosts, not quite, but you believe in what the body remembers. You believe in the smell of the gallows, the twitching foot, the whisper of rope through wood. And tonight, as the wind grows still and the rope outside your window creaks just once, you wonder if they come for you in the dark, will you already be waiting? Love, murder, and the marriage bed. Marriage is no refuge from the knife. You lie beside someone who once made vows to you or to someone else, in a chapel or in a barn or beneath the open sky. The words were meant to bind, but they don't keep hands from trembling in the dark, and they certainly don't dull a blade. In many homes, knives are kept between lovers. Sometimes it's symbolic, a mark of shared labor, shared food, shared flesh. Sometimes it's practical. One knife between two people is all the household can afford. But it's also something else, a test, perhaps a quiet acknowledgement. That love and fear often sleep close together. In 1404, Marguerite was accused of murdering her husband while he slept. The court records from Kent are brief. They say he was found with 3 wounds to the chest, the knife still in the bedding. Marjorie claimed she woke to find him already dead. The neighbors spoke of arguments, whispers, strange herbs by the hearth. The magistrate blamed witchcraft. No verdict is recorded, but the story lingers. You think of it more than you should, especially when you lie awake longer than your partner, especially when their breathing changes or pauses, especially when you reach for the blanket and feel something hard beneath it. You don't mean to check, but you do. You glance over in the dark, you listen. Are they breathing evenly? Are their hands beneath the blanket or curled beside their face? Is the knife still between you, or is it pointed at you? You used to joke about it. Two people sharing a blade. How romantic, how medieval, but the joke wears thin in the cold. When trust becomes a flickering thing and the mind begins to wander. You remember how easily sleep becomes silence, how a turn back in the night feels like a locked door, how love can rot into suspicion without it raising its voice. You've heard stories, not just Marjorie's. A man poisoned by his wife with honey-soaked herbs. A bride who carved her initials into her groom's chest before vanishing into the woods. A couple who died in bed, knife between them, and no one ever figured out who struck first. You think about that knife more than you think about the vows. Yours is wrapped in cloth, not hidden. You both know where it is. You both could reach it in time. If something terrible happens, or if you misjudge a moment, tonight, your partner shifts, you flinch, but it's only a dream. Maybe yours, maybe theirs. You breathe together again, you listen for the rhythm to return, and then you wonder, is love enough when the knife is always within reach? The house with no locks. There are no locks on your door. Not real ones, not the kind made of iron or fitted by a smith. Those belong to nobles, merchants, abbots, high officials, people with coin to spare and doors worth sealing. You make do with what you have. You tie rope between the handles. Loop it twice, then a third time, pulling tight enough to leave marks on the wood. Sometimes you stack pots just behind the door. If they fall, you'll wake. If you wake in time, maybe that will be enough. It isn't always. The clever ones don't need force. They wait, they listen, they watch when you forget to tie the rope after a long day. They know which doors swell in the rain, which shutters rattle loose. They don't break in. They slip in, like smoke, like thought. You once found footprints inside. It was morning, cold and clear, the ground still soft from frost. You saw them by the hearth, a pair of bare prints, too large to be yours, too narrow to be your partner's. They faced the sleeping mat, but no one else had woken. No door left open. No coin missing, nothing stolen, just the prints, just that silent mark. Someone had stood over you while you slept, and left without a sound. You still think about it. The knife hadn't helped that night. It was under your mat. As always, sharp, clean, ready. But you hadn't stirred, neither of you had. Whatever entered the house was patient and kind, or disinterested, or not yet ready. You started sleeping closer to the door after that. You double the rope now. You check it twice. Sometimes you even place thorns beneath the windows. Not to injure. Just to hear the crunch if someone steps wrong. You've told no one about the prints, not even those you trust. Some things make you sound mad when spoken aloud. But you've changed. You wake more often now. Sometimes without knowing why. You check the corners. You keep your hand resting on the knife's hilt. The cold of the metal reminding you what's real. You dream less, or maybe more darkly. Sleep feels thinner, like fabric worn at the seams. There's a saying that an unlocked door is an invitation. You've never liked that saying. The world doesn't need invitations to come for you. It finds a way in, even when you've done everything right, even when the knots are tight and the pots are stacked just so. Tonight, the rope is secure, the fire is low, your eyes are heavy, but you will sleep lightly. Because, if something comes again, something that doesn't want coin or food or warmth, the knife may still not be enough. The night you killed a man, you thought it was an animal. The sound was soft, not like footsteps, more like brushing, a scrape, a breath, something moving low near the door. You sat up, listened. The fire had long since burned down. The room was cold still. He wore no shoes. That's the detail that won't leave you. The floor was rough with old straw and dirt, but he moved silently. That's how you knew it wasn't one of your own. No voice, no cough, just breathing, slow and close. You didn't wait. You struck first. The knife was already in your hand. It always is, these days. You didn't shout, you didn't warn. You lunged forward through the dark and found flesh. He cried out, just once, then collapsed. You lit a taper after. The blood had already soaked the bedding. It spread fast, warmer than anything else. In the room, you didn't recognize him. Thin, barefoot, maybe hungry, no weapon, no sack for stealing. Just a body, a face slack with pain or surprise. His hands were empty. In the morning, the priest came. You told him everything, or most of it. He nodded slowly, hands folded. He quoted the law, that a man may defend his home, that intention matters more than outcome. He spoke of fear and shadows, of saints who forgave worse. He offered you absolution before you even asked. You took it. He said the words. He made the sign. He left with heavy eyes. You burned the mattress, scrubbed the floor, but the stain had already sunk deep. You never found out who he was. No one claimed him. No family came asking. The village buried him near the woods without a marker. Some say he was mad. Some say he was starving. Some say he was never real. Just a shape the dark made solid. But you know better, you still hear it at night. Not every night, just the cold ones. The ones when the wind slipped beneath the door and the fire dies early. You lie awake, eyes open, waiting for that soft breath to return, waiting to strike again, waiting to hesitate this time. You haven't moved the knife. It still rests beside your hip. You still sleep naked for speed. But now, when you grip the handle, your hand trembles, not from fear, from memory, from the weight of something already done. You're told you are forgiven. But the blood on the mattress, the memory of it, the heat of it, the smell, disagrees, and tonight, as the shadows stretch across the walls and the floorboards creak. Without cause, you wonder, if it happens again, will you strike first once more? Or will you wait to see if the man speaks? The knife inherited, your knife isn't new. It's older than the roof above your head. Older than the wooden spoon on your table. Older, even, than the stone near the fire where you grind herbs and whisper to no one. You inherited it, not as a gift, as a warning. It belonged to your mother. She didn't keep it for cooking. She didn't use it on chickens or fish. She kept it beneath her sleeping mat, tied with twine and wrapped in cloth that smelled of sweat and soot. You only saw it once as a child. The edge darkened, not with rust. You asked her why she kept it. She said nothing then. Years later, she told you she used it on a man in 1311. A traveling merchant, she said. She never named him. He came into the village with coin, promises, teeth that were too white. People liked him, she didn't. One night, he followed her home, only once. She didn't scream, she didn't run. She used the knife. They found him by the river. She was never charged. The priest spoke of devils and tempters. The bailiff looked the other way. The other women in the village walked with straighter backs for weeks afterward. Your mother cleaned the blade herself. She never used it again. But she never let it go. When she grew ill, she called you to her side. She pressed the handle into your hand, thin fingers trembling, skin like parchment. She said only one thing. Better the devil dead than in your bed. You never forgot those words. No, it sleeps beside you. Same knife, same cloth. The handle worn smoother by her hand. Then yours. You've never used it. Not in the way she did. But it's ready, always ready. You sleep light, as she taught. You check the door twice. You keep rope knotted tight still. There are nights like this. Nights when something feels wrong in the walls. In the floorboards, in the air itself. Tonight you see eyes. At first. You think you imagine them? 2 pinpoints just beyond the crack in the wall. Watching. Not close, not far. Just enough to see you but remain unseen. You don't breathe. You don't blink. You let your hand move slowly across the straw until it finds the knife and you remember her voice. Not soft. Not kind, but certain. The way someone speaks when they've already decided. You whisper a prayer you haven't spoken in years. Not to heaven, to her. As if she still lingers near the hearth. As if her ghost sleeps beside you, the eyes vanish, but you still hold the blade. And as silence settles again and you lie there, skin bare against the chill, you wonder If someone enters tonight, will your story become theirs? The naked monk who killed a king. Monks were once assassins? That's not how they're remembered. Not in books, not in sermons. They're painted in robes. Heads bowed, hands folded, but some carried daggers beneath their habits. Some whispered prayers through clenched teeth as they moved toward sleeping men with holy silence. In 1407, Duke Louis of Orleans was stabbed to death on a cold November night. The killers came on horseback. The records say they waited near the Rue Vieille du Temple. When the Duke stepped from his carriage, they struck, cloaked men with blades, no mercy, but one detail was buried in rumor. Passed from servant to scribe to candlelit confessor, one of the attackers had been a monk. Naked, shaved head gleaming, mouth shut, blade already wet, no one wanted to believe it. A holy man, sent by God, trained in obedience and silence. How could he raise a hand against a king's brother? But you've lived near monks. You've heard them argue over bread, over coin, over flesh. Holiness does not mean harmlessness. You believe the story. It's the nakedness that stays with you. A kind of ritual, perhaps, or shame shed before bloodshed. Or maybe just practicality. No fabric to slow the movement, no robes to stain, no noise from rustling sleeves. A man stripped down to what matters, the knife, the will, the target. You've oiled your blade with blessed oil. Not much, just a touch from the chapel vial pressed into the steel with your thumb. It doesn't make the knife shine brighter or cut cleaner, but it feels heavier in your hand now, more final. As if something ancient watches through it, you sleep lightly tonight, not for fear of monks, but because power draws blades and you are not powerful, which makes you a witness, a threat, an accident waiting to happen. They say the Duke never saw it coming, that he was already halfway through the door when the blade met his side, that he died before the guards understood what had happened, that his blood soaked into the cobblestones where beggars now sleep. You lie closer to the wall than usual, your back cold, your chest exposed, your hand resting near the oiled blade. You think of a monk, his bare feet on stone. His steady breath, his certainty. You wonder if he prayed before the strike, or after. You think of your own prayers, how they've grown shorter, sharper, less for mercy, more for clarity, for strength. If the blade ever must rise, the candle sputters. Lo, you close your eyes, but you don't drift yet, not with the stories whispering just beneath the surface of sleep. And you wonder if the next visitor carries prayer and steel in equal measure, will you be the monk or the king? The bedbugs that brought madness. This time it's not rats, it's the bed. A new plague, they say, not carried in the streets or under floorboards, but in the places you lie still. In feather mattresses, in straw bundles, in linen seams. Small. Things impossible to catch, but always moving, always feeding, always hiding, just beyond your reach. In 1395, the city of Paris recorded something strange. Not just illness, not just sores, but madness. Reports of women screaming in daylight, tearing at their own skin, men flinging themselves into wells, howling that their flesh was crawling. A surgeon wrote of tiny bites in straight lines. Marks. That didn't scab, but itched until the mind frayed. They blamed bedbugs, not the word they used. Of course, they called them night fleas. Blood seeds, dream drinkers, names born of panic and prayers. But the symptoms were clear. And when they burned the mattresses, the screaming sometimes stopped, so you burned yours too. The flame was quick. The stench lingered. Feathers popped and twisted. The fabric melted, turned black, then gray. You watched it all. You made yourself watch. You slept on straw that night, on bare floor the next. You itch less now, but you don't sleep better. The silence is louder when there's nothing soft beneath you. You tried herbs, lavender, mint, rue. You crushed them and scattered them beneath your sleeping mat. You prayed over them. You whispered old words your mother never wrote down. Still, you wake with scratches you don't remember making. Red trails down your arms, along your ribs. Your skin remembers even when your mind doesn't, so you turn to the knife. It's more than a blade now. You carve symbols into the hilt, crooked marks from the church door, circles and crosses. Something you saw in a dream once, You don't know what they mean. You just needed the knife to look different, like it could do something. Because some nights you hear them, not the bugs, the voices, not loud, not close, but beneath the floor. In the straw, in the walls, a hum, almost a whisper that says, they're under your skin. You press the knife to your arm, not to cut, just to feel, just to remind yourself what's real. You haven't told anyone. They'd say it's nothing. Or they'd say your next, the madness moves fast once it starts. That's what they say in Paris now, that the insects carry more than blood, that they carry nightmares, that they don't stop at skin. Tonight you lie flat on the floor. No cushion, no blanket. The knife rests across your chest. The carvings glowing faintly in the candlelight, and you wonder if something is whispering in the straw. Will it be your skin that listens first, or your mind? The baby that didn't cry, it was born cold, silent, pale. The room held its breath. The mother waited for a sound, any sound, but there was none. No wail, no gasp, just stillness. And skin too white, too smooth, the midwife wrapped the child. Quickly, said nothing at first, then whispered that the spirits had stolen its voice. Maybe its soul, the body was warm enough to bury. That was all they could say. The village spoke carefully after. One neighbor, old and sharp-tongued, claimed she saw a blade beside the mother's bedding. Said she'd slept naked, with steel pressed to her chest. Said that kind of thing invited more than just bad dreams. Said silence follows where iron touches flesh during birth. No one argued, no one had the energy to. The priest avoided the home for a week. The midwife burned the sheets. The mother stayed inside until her voice returned. Thinner. Slower. Quieter. She never had another child. You remember that winter well. You were younger. Still frightened by things you didn't understand. But that baby, that silence, stayed with you longer than any storm. Since then, things have changed. Infant deaths become ritual. Knives are kept beneath cribs now. Small ones, blessed. If possible, sharpened. Always. Not to be used. Not unless something truly wrong enters the room. But to signal intent. To ward off spirits. To cut through whatever force steals breath before a name can be given. Some mothers sleep with the blade on their belly. Some carve protective signs into the wooden cradle. Some won't look at the child until it cries. As if silence alone could curse them. You used to think it was superstition. Now, you're not. Sure. Tonight, your own baby is silent, too silent. The fire is low. The room is still. You lie awake. Naked beneath the blanket, the knife resting against your thigh. You can't tell if the child breathes. You strain to hear. You dare not move too fast. Not yet. You don't want to wake a peaceful sleep. You don't want to find stillness. Your partner stirs but doesn't wake. The world holds its breath again. You slip from the mat, blade in hand. Cross the room without a sound. Your feet remember every board that creaks. Your fingers tremble as they reach for the cradle. You look. The child is there. Eyes closed, mouth shut. Still. You lean closer. You wait, then softly, barely a sigh. Comes breath. Relief shakes your knees. You grip the edge of the crib until it passes. You return to your mat, blade still warm in your palm, and lie beside the one who never woke. You do not sleep. You stare at the roof beams, listening to the silence, and you wonder, is quiet ever peace? Or just something waiting to be broken? Your final night, the war is coming, not in banners or trumpet calls. Not with lines of cavalry or declarations nailed to doors. It comes in whispers, in smoke on the horizon. In travelers who don't return, in bread that costs more than yesterday. In fear that tastes like iron, soldiers raid farms by moonlight. You've heard the stories, half-truths told by trembling mouths. Men in rusted mail, drunk on stolen wine, girls dragged from stables, elders struck down for hiding a sack of grain. The kind of war that isn't fought, just endured. The kind where no one remembers who started it, only who didn't make it. Through the night, tonight, your village prepares. There's no guard, no wall, no one to protect you but yourselves. So you sleep the only way you can, unclothed, knife in hand, not for comfort. Not for tradition, for speed, for silence, For the seconds that make the difference between standing and bleeding, you lie on straw, wrapped in shadow around you. Others do the same, whole families, still and waiting, eyes open in the dark. No. One speaks, no one wants to break the thin, fragile skin of this moment, where nothing has happened yet, and everything still might. Then you hear boots, soft at first, muffled by dirt and dew, not marching, sneaking, 1, 2, maybe more. You stop breathing. Your fingers curl tighter around the handle. Beside you, someone gasps, too sharp, too loud. Then the screams begin. Short, ragged, not distant. From a house not far, wood breaks, a door splinters, then silence. Not peace, just the kind of silence that comes after someone stops struggling. You don't move. This is it. This is why the knife has always been there. Why your mother slept with one. Why your father taught you to grip it with the blade angled. Lo, the way a butcher holds steel, why you've lived half your life with one eye open. This is why you hear footsteps again, closer this time, a soft jingle, a coin pouch, or a blade brushing armor. You can smell them now, sweat, ale, blood. Someone whispers a prayer. You don't. There's only the knife. Your body is ready. Tense without shaking. You feel the ground through your spine, the air through your ribs, the edge of the blade against your palm. If the door opens, you will strike, not for glory, not even to survive, only to matter even once, and then silence again. No boots, no breath, just the long, unbearable stillness that follows a decision. Not yet made, you do not sleep, not tonight. You stare into the dark and wait, and you wonder, when it finally happens, will it feel like an ending, or just a return to what life has always been? The naked truth. You survive, not cleanly, not without loss. But you live. The war moves on, leaving ashes behind. And from those ashes, life returns. Stubborn, quiet, slow. The fields grow again. The houses are rebuilt. The names of the dead are whispered less often. Your children grow tall. They ask you about the past, about the fear, the hunger, the nights without walls. You tell them some of it, the easier parts, the names of those who helped, the prayers that soothe, the days when the wind meant rain, and not fire, but not all of it. You leave out the blood in the straw, the knife in your hand, the sound a door makes just before it gives way. Some truths are inherited through silence. Locks are invented, iron ones, clever ones, keys that no longer hang from string but slide into fitted grooves. Your door closes with a sound like safety now. Your windows are barred, your roof doesn't leak when it rains. You hang herbs for scent, not protection. Your bed is soft. The mattress is clean, but even now, some sleep naked. Not all, most no longer need to. The blade has moved from the sleeping mat to the shelf, from the hand to the drawer. But a few remember or were told, and the habit lingers. Not from poverty, not from shame, from something deeper. Even now, a knife rests close by, just in case. No one says it aloud, but it's there, tucked in cloth, laid beneath pillows, pressed flat beneath floorboards, not sharpened often, but not forgotten either. The oil may have dried, but the memory hasn't, because history is never truly past. It shifts, changes clothes, learns new words, but it watches, it waits. Sometimes it returns as rumor, sometimes as law, sometimes in the eyes of someone at the door too late at night. You know better than to believe it's gone. You lived through too many nights when silence meant danger, when breathing too loud might wake the thing you feared most. Your children laugh at ghosts. You smile with them, but your hand still remembers how the blade felt in the dark. Your ears still know the sound of footsteps on wet earth. Your body still flinches when the wind slams a shutter too hard. You don't sleep like you used to, but then again, you never did, and maybe no one ever truly will, because fear, real fear, never forgets how to sleep. It lies quiet, curled. Beneath memory and time, it wakes only when needed, when the latch fails, when the dream returns, when the dark feels too close again. And so tonight, as the fire burns low and your home is quiet, you reach beneath the bed, you feel the old handle, and you wonder, is this peace? Or just another quiet moment between the screams?